I can sense that you're still back there. I've heard you this morning. My assumption is that you already made up your mind about me. Hey, there's one of those guys who made some poor financial decisions, overextended himself, he overspent. Or maybe you're thinking, hey, there's one of those guys that has conversations with himself in the reflection of the glass. Or no, I know what it was. It was the booze. Don't put money in that cup because he's just going to use it to buy alcohol anyway. I heard you singing that song a second ago about how God really loves us. I used to believe that too. Back before I thought that I needed him, oh yeah, I could sing all the songs about how God really loves me. I used to have a house. I used to have a job. I paid my bills. Sure, I carried some on credit, but you got to have fun now, right? So kick it down the road a little bit. Had a family too. Still can't make myself take it off. You know what I remember most? Just taking a hot shower that could last as long as I wanted it to last. Oh, I took that for granted. I thought something like that would never end. In fact, I complained in those moments when the hot water heater ran out after the first 40 gallons. And then I made that one ill-fated decision. I can almost see it like it was yesterday. No, I'm not talking about when the bottom fell out. I'm talking about when I made that first choice. It was something that it felt like everybody was doing. I'd seen the research, I'd heard the horror stories of how it can fall apart for people, but honestly, I thought I was stronger than those people. Thought they were just weak. I could watch myself. I could look ahead for the dangers. I knew that it was a road that was dangerous to head down. But if people would just keep their heads up and just dip their toes in a little bit, I figured they would have been fine. It was their fault. That wouldn't be my story. And oh man, let me tell you, for a while I was doing good. I was looking. I was keeping my eyes open. I was hiding it so well. It wasn't day one that all of a sudden I got in this position. It wasn't day 2 or 3 or 4. It was when I thought that I was at my most alert. And then it was like the lights went out. See, what I didn't realize was that while I thought I was looking in every bush and looking around every corner, that I was literally walking side by side with the danger that was watching for me. That it was lurking there with me each and every moment from the first time I made that decision. And man, when it pounced, when it wrapped that net tight around me that I didn't even know that I was in, I didn't have a chance. Looking back now, I can see that I was so naive, thinking that I could be stronger than it, thinking that it wouldn't be a big deal. Oh, I was so incredibly ignorant. And by the time I realized that from that first step I was in danger, it was too late. And I was powerless to get my way out of it. You know, I tried. I'd heard that phrase that God helps those who help themselves, and so, oh man, I tried to help myself. I worked harder than anybody had ever worked. I hid it better than anybody had ever hidden it. I kept telling myself that last time would be the last time, but then it was never, ever, ever the last time. Until I was done. I was toast. And the bottom came out. I didn't run to people for help. I didn't expect the government to bail me out of it. Definitely didn't want to bring my friends into it. And now here I am. I hear it. I hear those comments about how I'm an inconvenience, that we got to step around or step over and we're dirtying up the city, how we're a stain on the society that we live in. I hear the giggling children running up that are throwing money in the cup and then running away laughing at me as they leave. I hear the comments about how I'm indecent as I lay there trying to catch a nap. I hear all of it. I hear the rich people turning up their noses at me, and the middle class people using me as the cautionary tale for their children, as what life could happen if you walk down the wrong road. I know the politicians, they're making their promises of we're going to clean up the streets and we're going to get those people out of here. And hey, while I appreciate the new pair of socks every now and then, I hear the church people who come and give me the socks and then they run off so they can tell all their friends what a good deed they did while they sit down to their $50 meal. And you know what? Part of me resents you for it. I mean, how could I not? But another part of me gets it. Because it wasn't that long ago that I was just like you. I was doing the same things. I was saying the same things. Because I haven't always been here in this situation. And I get it. I'm easy to blame. Because the truth is, I made some poor choices. Now, I would say that some of them are the exact same choices you're making. You just have been bailed out of it more than I was. You've gotten away with it more than I did. But it was still my choice. I understand why I get ignored and avoided, why I'm despised. But you know, I'm not the only helpless person out there who's getting avoided and ignored and despised. I could just as easily be that kid who's sitting in class with you, who's just hoping that today will be the day that somebody will help me out with the bullies in class. But yet no one's there. I could just as easily be that coworker that everyone says is the snotty coworker who doesn't care about anybody because they won't grab lunch with people, when in reality they're trying to figure out how they're going to make it to their next paycheck because their spouse just lost their job. But nobody stops to listen to them. They just chatter about them. I could just as easily be that student athlete who everyone thinks is cocky out on the court, but in reality, they're just hoping that their game that they have tonight will be good enough that they'll be able to avoid the abuse when they get home tonight. A place that should be their safe haven, but in reality, it's their prison that they have to live in. Or I could be the worshiper in the pew just a few seats down from you, who's longing and thirsting for somebody to see the pain that they're in. Who's sitting there going, I know we just sang a song about how God really loves us, but right now I don't feel like God really loves me. And I certainly don't feel like the other people around me really do. I could be any of those people. I'm not, but I could be. You know, it makes me think of a couple of stories really, that a teacher who walked on this earth 2,000 years ago told. His name was Jesus. You might have heard of him. He's considered to be the most influential man to ever live. He's had a calendar reset because of him, educational foundations set up because of him, scientific explorations and discoveries found because of him and inspired by him. See, he told a story once about a man who decided to walk down a road that he knew was a dangerous road. It was the road that would go from Jerusalem to Jericho, and this was a road that was known to have robbers all over it. But this man thought that he could keep his eyes open, that he could watch for the danger in the bushes, that he could look around the next corner and know that was coming, never fully realizing that from the moment he stepped foot on the road, he was in danger and it was all going to fall apart. You know, you can read this story. You've probably heard it. There's a hospital in this area named because of this story. That's how big of a deal it is. But this man walked down the road, and before he knew it, the net was cinched tight. He was robbed, he was beat up, he was stripped of his clothing, and he was left for dead. But all hope was coming, because here comes the priest. You know it. Here comes the Levite. Here comes the people who should care about this man. And instead of caring about him, they did what these people up here who were leading worship a little bit ago did, and they just stepped on over him or stepped around him. Until the unlikeliest of heroes came along. This man came along, and he saw the man on the side of the road, and you know what he did? He walked up to him, and he said, hey, what decisions did you make that put you in this spot? Did you know that this was a road that you shouldn't walk down? Why? No. This man saw him, and that was it. He had compassion on him from that moment. He had compassion on the man from the moment he laid eyes on him, not after he found out why the man was in the position that he was in. Oh, sure, he could make some assumptions, but he didn't know. He didn't ask the man whether or not he had been with a group of friends and they had deserted him, or whether or not he had some protective detail with him and they just didn't do their job, or whether or not he was going to keep walking and he would find the rest of his friends or his protection dead. He didn't ask him any of those questions. He saw the man and had compassion on him from the moment he laid eyes on him. And then you know the rest of the story. He didn't just look at him and go, man, what a difficult life. I hope somebody takes care of him. There's another story that Jesus told about a shepherd who had sheep and he had goats, and he separates the sheep and the goats. And we know, looking at the story, that these sheep and these goats are supposed to represent people. And he looks at one group of people, he looks at the sheep, and he says, "You, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was in prison, you came to visit me. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was naked, you gave me clothes." And they look back at him and they say, but when did we ever see you in any of those conditions? And he responded to him by telling him that when you did those things for the least of these created of mine, these image bearers of mine that nobody cares for and nobody helps, when you did it for them, you did it for me. And then he looked at the other group of people and he said all the same things, only he said, "You didn't take care of any of those when I had those problems." And they said, "But when did we see that?" He says, "When you didn't do it for the least, when you were the one who walked around, you didn't do it for me." And then he sent those people into eternal damnation and the others into eternal glory. And I'm struck when I read and I hear these stories that in this story that we call the Good Samaritan, again, the teacher didn't seem to care what put him in that position. It didn't seem to matter at all why he was laying there. And when he tells the other story, it doesn't seem to matter at all why they're hungry or thirsty or naked or sick or in prison. It doesn't seem to matter. The only thing that seems to matter in these stories that he told were what did people do about it when they saw it? What was the response of the people who had the ability to help? Was it judgment? Was it avoidance? Was it, let's make sure that you can help yourself? Or was it he jumped right in? See, that God helps those who help themselves. Barna Research Group actually did a study not that long ago asking people what are the most widely memorized Bible verses that people have. And John 3:16, of course, came up on the list. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." A lot of people know that one. But you know what one of the other top ones was? God helps those who help themselves. There's only one problem with that. It's not in the Bible. It's a Bible verse that isn't in existence. If you want to read the Quran, the Hindu scriptures, you can find it, where it tells us that Allah helps a population after the population has taken steps to help themselves. Or if you want to read the Aesop fables from ancient Greece, you can find a version of it where it says that the gods help, not God, the gods help those who help themselves. Or in the 16th century when Algernon Sidney wrote his discourse concerning government, you can read that God helps those who help themselves. Or how about in our country, the United States of America, we can go back to Ben Franklin and his Poor Richard's Almanac in the 1700s when he wrote, "God helps those who help themselves," probably thinking that he was quoting Scripture. But the problem was he wasn't. Because nowhere in our Scriptures of those who follow this teacher named Jesus do we find a phrase that says, "God helps those who help themselves." In fact, what we seem to find over and over again is that he is a God of the complete opposite of that. See, in Isaiah 25:4, Isaiah is writing about God. He says, "You have been a defense for the helpless, a defense for the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat." Not you have defended those who have put up the walls to defend themselves, but a defense for the helpless. Not a defense for those who have figured out how to get out of their problem, but for the needy in their distress. And one of those early followers of Jesus who came after Jesus, a guy who had at one point tried to eliminate all these people who were following this way of this teacher named Jesus, this growing influence that he had, but who had eventually realized that he was in the wrong and Jesus was in the right. He wrote these words, "While we were still helpless, at the right time, Christ died for us." Not after we asked for him to die, but while we were still helpless. He died for us. While we were still sinners. That's when he made his sacrifice. That's when he began to help. And the same guy wrote to a church in a city called Corinth, and he said, he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us. God helps those who help themselves, or God takes on the problems of the people who need help. He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. A God completely of the opposite. And maybe you're sitting here and you're going, why would I care what this teacher from 2,000 years ago had to say? Maybe you're not thinking it, but if you did, I'm glad you asked. The Mayo Clinic did a study on the health benefits of volunteering, and the mental health organization did a study that they titled Kindness Matters, and both of them found the same things to be true. That when we help those who are in need, it's a benefit to our own mental and physical health. That they began to see people who were suffering from anxiety and depression come out of anxiety and depression as they helped other people in their times of need. They began to see people with sicknesses that couldn't be figured out become healthier as they put the needs of others in front of their own. And part of their understanding of that is because it put things into perspective for them. It took their attention off of woe is me. And instead it began to say, I can help somebody else even in the circumstances that I'm in. It was healing. They began to find in their research that one good deed actually inspired another good deed, and another good deed, and another good deed. And they began to see that society was helped by following the words of this teacher who lived 2,000 years ago. That instead of everybody saying the government needs to fix this problem or somebody else needs to fix this problem, people began to say, I can help fix this problem. I can help be a defense for the needy. And they began to see that it works. We don't have to start by solving all of the world's problems. You're probably not going to be the one who eradicates homelessness. You're probably not going to be able to house every refugee. But you can start somewhere. You can start at home. I'm sure there's somebody in your house that could use a little bit of help, and it would give you a little bit of practice. Doing some chores for them without making sure that everybody knows that you did a chore. or writing a nice note and leaving it in somebody's lunchbox. It's amazing what a kind word can do for somebody in a hard time. You can start at work by giving some encouragement to somebody who needs to be built up a little bit. You can start at school. When you see that kid sitting all by themselves, and instead of going over and sitting by them, and even inviting your friends to sit with them too. You can start in your community with something as simple as giving a genuine smile to somebody. Or helping that short person in Walmart reach the thing on the top shelf. I know some short people who would appreciate it. Or finding an elderly person who needs some help raking some leaves. Or, if the weather in Indiana stays the way it is, shoveling a little bit of snow. So you don't have to miss the opportunities that God has put right in front of you because you're trying to look at the big giant things way down the road that you're planning for. He has surrounded us because of the world that we live in with people who are needy. The reality is, there's a lot of stories of people on the streets, but we've all been robbed of Eden. Every last one of us has been robbed of the original plan, the original intention for the world that we live in. A world of perfect unity with Christ, of walking through a garden that was perfect. We've all been robbed. We've had an enemy who has convinced us to give it away with our poor decisions, or we've had an enemy who has used others to rob it from us through no wrongdoing of our own. Regardless of how we've lost it, we have all lost Eden. All this teacher from 2,000 years ago, this itinerant, incredibly influential teacher from 2,000 years ago, is commanding. It's not a request, it's a command. All he's commanding us to do is the same thing that's been done for us. See, if we can sit in here and we can sing how God really loves us, then he's already found us when we were helpless and when we were needy, when we were defenseless. If we can sing those words and really truly believe them, not just because our lives are actually pretty easy, but because we've realized how low our lives had gotten, and we can sing those words, then he's already done it for us. And he's commanding us to do the same for others. And so my question for you this morning, or questions for you this morning, who has God put in your life that you've been ignoring or avoiding or despising, that he's saying, today is the day. I've been telling you to do this for weeks or months, but today is the day that you follow my command to feed those who are hungry and give water to those who are thirsty, clothes to those who are naked, visit those who are in the prison. Oh, that prison can look like so many things. To care for the sick, to see the man or the woman lying on the side of the road, and instead of sitting there saying, if they would just, then I would help. Who is God saying, stop? Stop waiting for them to fix their problems and you be part of the solution. My second question for you is, what are you trying to power your way through that you don't have the strength to power through. That you're trying to tell yourself, I won't be another one of those casualties. I'm stronger than that. I know this is a bad idea. I know it's not something I should be doing. I've seen lives destroyed, but I won't be one of those stories. What is it? Or what are you already know? This is ruining my life. But I've got to help myself out of it. This is the spot to leave that. And these are the people that can help you walk through it. I truly believe that. Whether you want to find a staff member of this church, or you need to just talk to the person next to you in the pew. Who is God calling you to? What is God calling you out of? I don't want your story to end up like this story. And I know you don't want your story to end up like this story. There are things that happen to us that are out of our control. And I understand that. There are things that we make poor decisions on that they were in our control, and I understand that. But I want you to hear that you don't have to figure your way out of those alone. There is a God who is himself there for us at every step, but who has also commanded his church to be there for those who are hurting. I hope that we can be a church who is with you as you are hurting and who will walk with the world as it's hurting.